I was slicing brisket when my wife stood up and told everyone I was too old for her now. Just like that. In the middle of a family barbecue, with her parents, her sister, our nieces and nephews all sitting around the patio table, she dropped it like it was a joke. Except no one was laughing, except maybe her. I mean, come on, she said, swirling her wine glass like she was on some reality show. 18 years of marriage, and now it's just boring. Predictable. He's turned into a routine. I need something fresh. The backyard fell silent except for the distant hiss of the grill. Her father choked on his drink, and her sister, Lena, just stared at her like she'd grown horns. I didn't say a word. Not because I didn't have one. Because I had too many. My name's Mark, by the way. I'm 52. And up until that exact moment, I had been stupid enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were finally starting to settle between us. That the late-night texting was innocent. That the sudden fitness obsession wasn't about impressing someone else. That the secrecy was stress, not seduction. But when she made that comment, when Hannah turned me into a punchline right in front of people who once celebrated our wedding with open arms and homemade lasagna, I realized I hadn't just been living in the dark. I'd been buried in it. I set the knife down on the cutting board. Slow, deliberate. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. I glanced at Lena, though. She was watching me carefully, her lips parted, eyes wide, not in pity, but in shock. And something else. Something I didn't recognize right away. Later, when everyone started pretending nothing happened, when Hannah had floated back into the house with that 20-something swagger she'd recently adopted, I stayed behind. I finished slicing the brisket, handed it out to the kids, and grabbed a beer from the cooler like it was just another Sunday. But inside, a quiet storm had started. You see, I didn't need fireworks or shouting matches. I didn't need to make a scene to get even. I'd been underestimated, written off, treated like a relic of her youth, something to be packed away in a drawer marked done. But I wasn't done. I was just getting started. That evening, after the sun dipped behind the trees and the kids were chasing fireflies out by the fence, I noticed Lena walking alone near the old swing by the garden. Her shoes were off, and she was swaying slightly, beer in hand, face glowing with that warm orange of twilight. I joined her without saying a word. We sat there for a few minutes, not talking, just listening to the soft creak of the chain and the fading laughter from the porch. Then she turned to me. I can't believe she said that, she whispered. In front of everyone. I shrugged. Neither can I. But then again, maybe I should have. Lena looked at me with those soft gray eyes, so different from her sister's sharp, performative glare. She's been different since she started training with that guy. The one at the gym. Tanner or Trevor or something. Of course. The trainer. The one with the perfect jawline and a chest that could bench press a truck. The one I wasn't supposed to worry about. You knew? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. I suspected. I didn't want to get involved. But I also didn't think she'd be that cruel. I didn't answer. I didn't need confirmation. I had it. Right there in her voice. The hesitation. The guilt. We stayed on the swing longer than we should have. Something about her presence, calm, grounded, real, hit me in a place I hadn't felt in years. No pressure. No performance. Just two people being honest for the first time in a long while. When the night ended and cars started rolling down the gravel driveway, I helped clean up. Hannah didn't even say goodbye, too busy laughing into her phone under the porch light. Lena, though, she touched my shoulder, real gentle, before getting in her car. Don't let her get away with that, she said softly. You're not the one who should be ashamed. And then she was gone. I stood there alone in the driveway, beer still cold in my hand, and thought, maybe I'm not. Maybe I've just been with the wrong person all along. The morning after the barbecue, the house was silent, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that buzzes under your skin, like the pause before a thunderclap. Hannah was already gone when I woke up. I figured she was at the gym, probably doing squats for a man half my age. Not that I was counting anymore. I sat at the kitchen table with black coffee and yesterday's bitterness. No messages from her. No apology. Just a lipstick-stained mug in the sink and the scent of her expensive perfume lingering like a taunt. It hit me then. Not just that she didn't love me anymore. That I didn't matter to her anymore. Somewhere along the way, I'd become furniture. Reliable, unchanging, and easy to ignore. I could have yelled. Confronted her. But what good would that do? People like Hannah didn't respond to logic or heartbreak. They responded to power. To attention. To whatever was shiny and new. I wasn't shiny anymore. I was history. So I decided to stop trying to compete and let her bury herself in the choices she made. I went about my day like nothing had cracked open the night before. Washed my truck, mowed the lawn, fixed the gutter that had been sagging since March. But every now and then, my mind would drift back to the way Lena had looked at me by that swing. Not pitying, not awkward. It was like she saw something worth defending, like I wasn't invisible to her. That night, I was flipping through old photos, ones Hannah hadn't bothered to take down when she replaced every frame in the hallway with abstract art and mirrors. In one shot from about 10 years back, we were standing on a dock in Maine, her arms wrapped around my waist, laughing. She looked like a different person then, real, unfiltered, not posing for anyone. I used to believe that version of her was still in there, just buried under the noise. But now I wasn't so sure. The door opened around 9. She strolled in like it was any other Tuesday, gym bag over her shoulder, phone glued to her hand. "Hey," she muttered, barely glancing up. I looked at her for a long moment. "You humiliated me yesterday." She paused. "Oh, God, you're not still hung up on that, are you?" "It was a joke, Mark." People laughed. "No, you laughed." She rolled her eyes and disappeared into the bedroom. I didn't follow. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been ignored. That night, we slept in the same bed, but it may as well have been two different planets. Her back turned, mine stiff with resentment. The next few days passed like that. Polite silence. She came and went as she pleased. I kept the peace, let her unravel in her own time. But what she didn't know, what she would never expect, was that the version of me she thought had faded into irrelevance wasn't gone. He was just waiting for a reason. That Friday, Lena texted me. It was short, simple. "You okay?" I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying. "Not really. But I'm used to it." She responded almost immediately. "Want to get a drink? Just talk." I hesitated for maybe 2 seconds, then said yes. We met at a small bar just outside town, one of those quiet places with dim lighting, vinyl booths, and a jukebox that still played real music. Lena was already there when I arrived, sipping a glass of wine and nervously playing with her necklace. She looked up when I walked in, smiled, and stood to greet me with a soft hug. "I wasn't sure if you'd actually come," she said. Neither was I. We ordered drinks. Talked about everything but Hannah, at first. Childhood memories, the family vacation to the lake, her job teaching art to high schoolers. I had forgotten how easy Lena was to be around. There was no performance, no spotlight. Just warmth. Eventually, the conversation turned. "She's seeing someone else, isn't she?" I asked. Lena winced, then nodded. "Tanner, the trainer. She brags about it when she's drunk. Says she feels alive again." Her voice cracked slightly. "She's not the person I used to look up to." I clenched my jaw, then laughed, a low, bitter laugh. I guess I was the last to figure it out. Lena shook her head. "You didn't want to believe it. That's not weakness. That's love." I stared at her for a moment. "And what do you call what she's doing?" "Cowardice," she said quietly. "And cruelty." We sat in silence for a while. Not awkward. Not tense. Just heavy. Real. Then she leaned in slightly, her voice softer. "I don't know if I should say this, but I always wondered what it would be like if we'd met first." That hit me like a gust of warm wind through a cold window. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because something shifted in that booth, something unspoken, but undeniable. I saw her not as Hannah's sister, not as someone caught in the crossfire, but as a woman with her own mind, her own heart, and maybe, just maybe, a sense of justice that matched my own. When we left the bar, she walked beside me to my truck. Before getting into her car, she turned and touched my hand. "You're not too old, Mark. Not even close." And then she was gone again, like a whisper that lingered on my skin long after it disappeared. That night, I didn't sleep much. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft breaths of a woman who didn't care if I came home or not. But my thoughts weren't on her. They were somewhere else entirely. Somewhere far more alive. The next morning, the sun was already high by the time I got out of bed. Hannah was gone again, probably off to another session with Tanner or Trevor or whatever boy toy was sculpting her ego one set of deadlifts at a time. I made myself breakfast, eggs, toast, black coffee, quiet, clean, deliberate. It was the first time in weeks I'd sat at the table without checking the door. I was done waiting for someone who had already left me in every way that mattered. Around noon, Lena called. Not texted, called. Her voice was soft, unsure. "I hope this isn't weird, but..." "I was thinking about what we talked about. You doing anything later?" I could hear in her tone she was testing the waters. Guilt? Maybe. But not about me. About her sister. That line in the sand that had kept us from saying or doing anything that might feel like betrayal. I've got time, I said. Want to go somewhere? She hesitated, then said, there's this little overlook about 20 minutes out of town. I go there sometimes to clear my head. You up for a drive? I'll be there in 20. I picked her up in my truck, and the drive was almost entirely silent, but it wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, like we'd both run out of excuses and finally decided to stop pretending. The road curled through the woods, sunlight breaking through the trees in soft, golden streaks, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man losing something. I felt like I was about to find something instead. The overlook was quiet. Just us, the open sky, and a valley full of rust-colored leaves below. We sat on the hood of my truck, the metal still warm from the drive. Lena sipped from a thermos she brought, sweet tea, and passed it to me without a word. You ever think about starting over? She asked after a while. Every damn day, I said without missing a beat. She nodded. Sometimes I think I picked all the wrong paths just because they were the ones people expected me to walk. You and me both. She turned to me then, her eyes steady. I never thought I'd be sitting here with you. Not like this. I looked out over the trees. Neither did I. But somehow, it makes more sense than anything else lately. We didn't touch. Not yet. But something passed between us, an energy, a quiet agreement. There was no going back now. The line had already been crossed, even if we hadn't said it out loud. That evening, we didn't go home right away. We picked up takeout and drove down to the old marina where her family used to take the boat out on summer weekends. The docks were quiet, the water calm. We sat at a picnic table eating burgers and fries, laughing at stories we hadn't told in years. She talked about her students, about how she wanted to open her own studio one day. I talked about the business I'd nearly sold, and the part of me that still wanted to build something of my own, not just for profit, but for purpose. The more we talked, the more I remembered how good it felt to be seen. Not judged, not used, not ignored. Seen. When I finally dropped her off at her apartment, the night had folded into itself, quiet, cool, full of stars. I walked her to the door, and she hesitated before unlocking it. You sure you're okay? She asked. I nodded. Getting there. And then she surprised me. She leaned up, kissed my cheek, and whispered, you deserve better. Don't let her make you forget that. I drove home with the windows down, letting the wind strip away the last bits of self-doubt clinging to me. The house was dark when I returned. Hannah wasn't back. I didn't care. The next day, I found her in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone with that fake smile plastered on her face. She barely acknowledged me. Morning, she muttered. Morning, I said, pouring myself coffee. She looked up then, as if something in my voice was different. She squinted. You good? Yeah. Slept great. Her eyes narrowed slightly. That's new. I smiled politely. A lot of things are. She didn't say anything else, just watched me like she couldn't decide if I was bluffing or simply beyond her reach now. That alone was enough fuel for the rest of the day. Lena texted again that afternoon. You left your flannel in my truck bed. Want it back or should I claim it? I replied, only if you promise to wear it. An hour later, I got a photo, Lena standing on her apartment balcony, my flannel draped loosely over her shoulders, sleeves hanging past her hands. Her hair was messy, wind-tangled, and she had the kind of smirk that didn't ask for permission. That night, after dinner, I sat alone in the den while Hannah locked herself in the bathroom for her nightly skincare routine and phone scroll session. I stared at that photo, not just because Lena looked good in my shirt, but because it was the first image in a long time that made me feel something other than forgotten. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally moved, I didn't go to bed. I went out to the porch and stayed there, listening to the crickets and watching the moon rise through the trees, heart beating a little faster than it had in months. Lena didn't just wear my flannel. She wore something I hadn't realized I'd lost: respect, attention, connection. And that, more than anything, made me feel young again. 3 days after Lena sent that photo in my flannel, the axis of my world quietly shifted. It didn't happen with a bang or a screaming match. No furniture was thrown, no phone call slammed, no door left hanging on one hinge. It happened the way things usually fall apart when they've been rotting for a while: silent, slow, undeniable. Hannah came home late again that night. Her heels clicked down the hallway like they owned the place. She tossed her purse onto the counter, pulled off her earrings, and asked, flat as a pond on a windless day, "Did you pay the lawn guy?" "I did it myself." She blinked, like the idea of me doing anything with my own hands now felt foreign to her. You mowed the lawn? I did a lot today, I said without looking up from the paper I wasn't really reading. Cut the grass. Fixed the railing on the back porch. Started clearing out the garage. Her eyes scanned me with something between suspicion and boredom. Getting ready to sell the place or something? No, I said. Just getting rid of what doesn't serve me anymore. She didn't ask what that meant. She didn't care enough to push. She just muttered something about taking a shower and disappeared upstairs. That's when I pulled out my phone and texted Lena, "You busy tonight?" She responded immediately, "No." Why? I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering. Then I typed, "I need a break from this place. Want to get out of town for a bit." A beat. Then, "Say when." By the time Hannah came back down, wrapped in a towel and smelling like vanilla body wash, I had already packed an overnight bag and left it in the truck. She barely noticed. "I'm going to bed," she said. I nodded. "I'm going out. Now." Her tone was casual, but there was an edge to it, like her control over me had slipped, just a bit, and she didn't like the feeling. "Yeah," I said. "Need air." She didn't stop me. She didn't ask questions. She just shrugged and went upstairs, assuming I'd return like always, tail tucked and spirit deflated. But I didn't. I met Lena just past the county line, where the road opens up into fields and stars. She was waiting in her car, headlights off, leaning against the hood in an oversized hoodie and jeans, hair down, a thermos in her hands again. When I pulled up, she smiled that quiet, knowing smile and climbed into the passenger seat without a word. "Where we going?" she asked as I turned the key. "Nowhere in particular," I said. "Just not here." We drove for miles, the road lit only by the high beams and a sliver of moon. We passed shuttered gas stations, sleeping farms, and empty fields that stretched out like forgotten pages in a photo album. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't heavy, it was full of meaning. Around midnight, we pulled into a small lakeside inn. Nothing fancy, 2 stories, wraparound porch, flickering sign. I hadn't booked anything. I just walked in, asked for a room with a view, paid in cash, and handed Lena the key like it was a promise. The room was simple. Clean linens. Soft light. A window that looked out onto a dock and the shimmering lake beyond. We sat on the edge of the bed and kicked off our shoes, both of us suddenly aware of how quiet the world had become. "You sure about this?" she asked softly, searching my face. I looked at her. Really looked. Not as Hannah's younger sister. Not as the girl who used to babysit our kids at family parties. But as a woman who saw through my scars without flinching. A woman who had been walking beside me longer than either of us realized. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. She reached up and brushed a hand through my hair. "You're not old," she whispered. "You're just with someone who stopped appreciating what time gave you." And then she kissed me. It wasn't fast. It wasn't clumsy or desperate. It was the kind of kiss that says, "I see you. I've always seen you." The kind that isn't just about lips or hands, but about everything that had gone unsaid between us for years. That night, we didn't talk about Hannah. We didn't talk about rules or consequences or what came next. We just existed. Together. Honest. Stripped of the weight we'd been dragging around. When morning came, sunlight creeping through the curtains and dust floating like fireflies in the golden beams, Lena was wrapped in my flannel, standing by the window with coffee in hand. "You look good in that shirt," I said, still half lying on the bed. She turned, one brow raised playfully. "Think I'll keep it. Be my guest." After checkout, we drove back in silence, but it was a different kind of quiet. The kind that lives in the space between two people who no longer owe each other masks. When I pulled into her driveway, she leaned over, kissed my cheek again, and said, "If she ever finds out, don't apologize. You didn't betray her." She left long before we ever touched. I drove home with windows down again, air fresh and cool, the noise of my old life getting smaller in the rearview mirror. Hannah was still asleep when I walked in, sprawled across the bed like she had the world at her feet. But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking at the future, and it finally had a face again. When I stepped back into the house that morning, something had shifted, not in the air, but in me. It wasn't just that I'd spent the night with Lena. It wasn't just that I'd crossed a line that once would have felt like betrayal. It was the realization that I didn't owe Hannah anything anymore, not loyalty, not silence, not my self-worth. I had given her 18 years. She had repaid me with contempt, boredom, and betrayal. She was still asleep, sprawled across the bed with one leg kicked out of the sheets, her mouth slightly open, phone clutched in her hand like it had grown into her palm overnight. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the woman I once thought I'd grow old with. But I already had. Alone. I took a shower, got dressed, brewed coffee. She didn't stir until nearly noon, when she dragged herself into the kitchen with bedhead and no trace of shame. "You were out late," she muttered, opening the fridge. Or should I say early? I didn't answer. She looked up. "You gonna tell me where you went?" "No." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me." I finally turned to her, calm and quiet. "You don't get to ask that anymore." "Oh, I don't," she snapped, slamming the fridge door. "You disappear all night and now suddenly you've got an attitude?" I took a slow sip from my mug. "You've been disappearing for months. The only difference is I didn't insult you at a family event and humiliate you in front of everyone we know." Her face froze. It was the first time in weeks she didn't have a snappy response. I watched the color drain from her cheeks. "You think I don't know about Tanner?" I continued. "You think I didn't see the signs? The late nights, the secretive texts, the way you suddenly had the energy of a 22-year-old and zero interest in touching your own husband." "Mark." "No," I cut her off. "You don't get to say my name like it still means something. You've been checked out of this marriage for a long time. The difference is, I finally realized I don't have to stay in it just because we share a mortgage and memories." She swallowed hard. "So what? You're just giving up?" "No," I said. "You did. I'm just catching up." She looked like she was about to say something else, maybe another excuse, maybe another jab, but her phone lit up on the counter. I didn't need to see the name to know who it was. She snatched it, turned it face down, and folded her arms like a teenager caught sneaking in past curfew. "You gonna tell me what you did last night?" she asked, voice lower now, a bit of desperation creeping in. I leaned forward just slightly. "No, but I will tell you who I was with." Her eyes locked on mine. "Lena." The name landed like a slap. Her mouth fell open, but no sound came out. She blinked once, twice, then finally managed, "My sister. She was there for me when you weren't. She saw me, listened, treated me like a man, not an inconvenience. She's 10 years younger. And somehow," I said, "she has twice the maturity you've shown in the last year." "You slept with my sister?" she whispered, hands trembling now. I didn't flinch. "She wore my shirt this morning. Said she's keeping it." She looked like she'd been punched in the throat. Her breathing was shallow. Her hand clutched the edge of the counter. I picked up my keys, slung my jacket over my shoulder. "Don't bother calling her. She already knows what this is." "You're disgusting," she spat. "No," I said, pausing at the door. "I'm done being humiliated. There's a difference." And with that, I left her standing in the kitchen, trembling and speechless, the way she'd left me feeling for months. By the following week, I had moved into a small rental cabin just outside town, quiet, clean, full of light. Lena helped me carry boxes. Her presence didn't fill the silence. It replaced it with something better. Peace. The divorce papers came fast. Turns out, when a woman realizes she's lost both her husband and her younger sister's loyalty, she suddenly wants to move on quickly. She didn't fight for the house. She didn't fight for much at all. Maybe she was too embarrassed. Or maybe, for the first time, she realized she wasn't holding the power anymore. Lena started spending more time at the cabin. At first, it was innocent dinners, walks, long talks on the porch. But it didn't stay that way. We both knew it wouldn't. What we shared wasn't just a reaction to betrayal. It was something real, something honest, something earned. The first time she stayed the night, she made breakfast the next morning wearing one of my old flannel shirts and nothing else. She danced barefoot in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, humming along to a Fleetwood Mac record playing in the background. I took a picture. Just one. Not to post, not to prove anything. Just to remember. Because that's what happiness looks like after heartbreak. It doesn't arrive with a grand gesture or a dramatic twist. It creeps in when you least expect it, quiet, calm, certain. And that's how the story ends. She said I was too old for her. But her younger sister? She proved just how wrong that was. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and let us know what part hit you the hardest. Your support keeps stories like this coming, and trust me, there's more where that came from.